Care studentesse, cari studenti, buongiorno. Questa è la lezione per Asia-Africa 1 del 23 marzo 2020. Spero che stiate tutti bene e vi dico che quello che più mi manca della vita accademica è proprio lo stare insieme. Questo silenzio dello streaming, della registrazione, potrebbe sembrare una cosa perfetta per un docente, ma in realtà no, non è così. Anche se più volte vi facciamo grandi cazziate perché magari parlate un po' troppo in classe, è poi quello che manca in queste occasioni. E poi lo sapete, mi piace sorridere, mi piace ridere con i ragazzi, e quella è la parte più bella della didattica, oltre a cercare di aprirvi nuovi orizzonti. La cosa bella di essere insegnanti è illuminare le menti degli altri e anche dare un sorriso. Però non vi preoccupate, ci rifaremo, ci aspetta una grande estate. Con questo comincio la lezione con una piccola ripetizione di quello che abbiamo già fatto martedì e poi andiamo avanti. Ci tengo a rassicurarvi che non sono impazzita, che io non voglio tutte queste cose memorizzate, che non mi interessano. Dovete immaginare che quello che io vi sto lanciando per questa prima parte del corso sono tanti piccoli ami, tante piccole esche, che spero possano accendere un interesse nella vostra mente. Io non mi metterò a dire, ok, dimmi tutte le caratteristiche del African English. No, sarete voi a dirmi quello che vi è piaciuto di più per la lingua, le lingue che avete preso in considerazione. Ok? With this said, anche perché fare una lezione così frontale dove non si interagisce diventa difficile nel momento in cui io posso cominciare a parlare e finisco il corso nel giro di un paio di registrazioni. Invece con questa modalità sia di spiegazione del testo integrato con i video, spero di rendere la cosa un po' più appetibile. Detto questo, vi ricordo che la settimana scorsa abbiamo parlato ci siamo soffermati sui diversi African accents. Okay? Abbiamo visto abbiamo guardato video di persone che erano dei linguisti e soprattutto non linguisti, perché questo ci permette di guardare la realtà nuda e cruda, così com'è, come queste queste varietà dell'inglese vengono parlate, e abbiamo avuto la possibilità di ascoltare diversi accenti e diverse spiegazioni al riguardo. No? Se vi ricordate bene, quando abbiamo visto questo video a proposito usava l'esempio di Do You Know the Way? Dove questa ragazza ci spiegava un po' a modo suo come how to mock, come riprodurre un accento di tipo africano. Diceva, you have to use deep voice, separate words, and and pronounce every letter. We also looked at these comparisons between English from Ghana and Nigeria. No? And we saw that Nigerian, if I remember correctly, uses more O sounds, like closed sounds, like bus would be more like bus. And still, we are starting to get into the main topic of this course. These two ladies, were talking about proper English, okay? Several times they said that they didn't speak proper English or they referred to proper English. Just keep that in mind because we're getting into that and what that means. Then we started the grammar part. the grammar differences. And we said that these varieties of English have a tendency not to mark the plural. So, for instance, somebody from the Philippines would say Filipino is only one of the subject without putting the S. What these languages have is a tendency to not use articles, or actually to replace them with something different, with a system that is called specific or non-specific, instead of using definite and indefinite articles. For instance, they would say everyone has car in Indian. So instead of saying everybody has a car, they just use car without an article. Or they would replace definite and indefinite articles with the word one. I'm staying in one house with 3 other, or here got one stall selling up noodles, okay, where they use one. By the way, it might just be something that is due to the person that I'm thinking of, but I also noticed this with people in Poland who speak English. They tend not to use the word one, but the use of the word this. Okay, replacing it articles. I have to study it because it's pretty interesting for me. So it's probably something that I noticed in Polish people who have a very good level of English, but they still are not 100% following the so-called standard inner circle English. Anyway, just thinking about that. Sorry for the digression. There's also a tendency to change quantifiers. We looked at the cases like don't eat so much sweets, or of not using he and she. Okay, so using them in different way than from standard English. So when I met my first husband, she was a student. Now, as for today, let's look at verbs. We said that generally speaking, these varieties of English tend to simplify this inner circle English. So, quite obviously, quite predictably, we can see that in many cases, the third person singular present form is not marked. What does this mean? That, for instance, in the Philippines, you'll hear something like she drink milk instead of she drinks milk. Or every microcosm consists of many cells. This example is from an Indian speaker. So again, not a lot of uses of s's for the singular form. Same thing happens with past tense. It's not always marked. An instance from Hong Kong, Mandarin, I learned it privately, where they wanted to use past tense though. My wife, she passed for Cambridge from Singapore, English. Now, pay attention to this one because it might be a little difficult. These languages tend to use an aspect system rather than a tense system. What does this mean? When we're talking about aspect, this means that the action is finished or not finished. Remember when you had to learn, and I think you're still doing it with your mother tongue teachers, the difference between present perfect and simple past. Remember that you use present perfect for something that started in the past and is still continuing. Whereas simple past means that whatever you were doing is finished. This is what aspect means, okay? To show whether an action is finished or not. So, what do these languages do? They don't use tenses the way inner circle Englishes would do. So to say, for instance, something like I am eating or I was eating, Malaysian English would use I still eat, because that still gives an idea of continuity. Okay? So that can mean either I am eating, something continuous, because I still eat, or I was eating, because that still indicates something that is continuous. Or, in Indian English, there's a specific use of the inner circle present perfect to indicate a time in the past. So instead of using simple past, some varieties of Indian English use present perfect. I have worked there in 1960. Then, remember what we told you. Remember the thing that all English teachers want you to learn about stative verbs. Stative verbs indicate a state, like know, not like or love, be. In this case, in other varieties of English, there is a tendency to use be plus verb plus ing forms for stative verbs. So in East African English, you would hear something along the line of she is knowing her science very well, instead of she knows. Or Mohan is having 2 houses for Indian English. In an inner circle English, this would not be correct, but this is the tendency that there is in the outer and the expanding circles. Now, something that is difficult for everybody when they're learning a new language, no matter what language, the use of prepositions. So what happens in these other varieties of English is that they simply form new phrasal or prepositional verbs. Okay, remember that phrasal verbs are those verbs that change their meaning, depending on the preposition that follows them. Okay, like you look up something in the dictionary or you look after your little brother. They have a different meaning depending on the preposition that you use with them. So these languages are very creative, are very productive for phrasal and prepositional verbs. So in East African English, for instance, you would hear something like her name cropped in the conversation. Or a better example that gives you a clear idea of what I'm talking about is from West African English, when this person says, I'm going to voice out my opinion. Okay, so this voicing out prepositional verb gives us the idea of movement. To voice out, that out reinforces the meaning of the verb, to voice. And then, the last aspect that I want to look at is the use of tags. Every variety of English has a different way of using tags, question tags. If I just think about the differences between, for instance, closer to home, the difference between British English and American English. British English tends to, uses definitely question tags that have the opposite meaning than how they are used in the sentence. What do I mean? Let me explain that a little better. It's raining, isn't it? The sentence is affirmative. The question tag has to be negative. But in American English, actually, the tag is also affirmative if the sentence is affirmative. You'll likely hear something closer to, it's raining, is it? Than the British, it's raining, isn't it? Okay. The same thing happens for other varieties of English. Indian English or Sri Lankan English uses the tag no a lot. It's interchangeable. They use both no but also isn't it for India, Sri Lanka, and the same thing happens in Singapore, Malaysia, East and West Africa. More specifically, Eastern and Western Africa also use the tag not so, or Malaysian uses also the form is it. Okay, so just different ways of using the language. Now, I want you to, for this class, we're going to focus on the Filipinos English varieties. And in this first video, the videos for today are pretty long, so it might seem that the class is short, but it actually fills in the time that a regular class would last. The comments that we're going to make today, the videos that we're going to comment on for today are about Filipino. And I want you to pause this video now and go to the first link that I will post in the comment box. Give me a second, just let me number it. And it's an interview about how fluent the Filipinos are in English. It's actually a language challenge as well. So please pause the video, and this first video lasts 10 minutes, so see you back in 10. Okay, so we're back. Let me get back to the slides. A couple of comments on this video. We were talking about the differences between Tagalog, that is the language of the Philippines, English, and the local variety of English that is called Taglish. The interesting thing that you could see from this video is that the interviewer asked these students, or asked these people in general, to speak English only. How much did it last? Pretty little. And this shows you how correlated English, Tagalog, Spanish also, you could hear a couple of words of Spanish here and there, and Taglish are deeply connected in the Filipino communities. A couple of reflections on how English is taught in schools. And so it is all the education, is actually in English. But classes are in English, but notice that the speakers said that both teachers and students also use Tagalog and Taglish, of course. So Tagalog also becomes the vehicle language sometimes to communicate with students who do not understand something in English. Okay, so it's not totally banned. It's just, let's say, for education, they tend to do a sort of code switching, okay? They know that the classes have to be in English, but there's words of Tagalog here and there, okay? Let's say that it's like when, I don't know, last week I was, we were looking at the lyrics of Lemon Tree, no? At a certain point I said, why you? No? It was just a comment, a sincere comment, that I used in a case of code mixing, where I knew that I was teaching in English, but I just wanted to drop in a word that would wake you up, that was a sincere comment. And honestly, I thought that was the only way I could do that. But anyway, this leads to what one of the students said. There are some concepts that you can explain in English and other concepts that you can only say in Filipino. Okay? That why you wouldn't have had the same force, the same emphasis, if I had said something like, oh dear, okay? Some things just have to be in a language and not in the other. Then other students were quite shocked, or at least impressed, that other colleagues or people who, for instance, had moved from the Philippines to the United States did not understand Taglish. And that gives us an idea of how different Taglish is from English from an inner circle. Another comment leads us to the leading concept that is behind this course. You're intelligent if you're fluent in English. This is what one of the interviewees says at a certain point. This means that English, standard British English, or standard inner circle English, of course, is still what is considered the language, the prominent language, the important language, the language of those who count. And finally, this last comment on the future of Tagalog. What happens in countries like this, where English could become the dominant language? What happens to the local varieties of English and all their local languages, and to all their richness, and to all their literature, and to all their culture, if these languages are not taught anymore to children? They could be defeated, they could die, and they get lost forever. Now, something lighter. I got into a defense. A little video, 13 minutes, sorry, about some differences between Filipino English and American English. This is just by a speaker, not a linguist, common speaker, not a linguist. And so I want you to focus on this video over here. I'll pause here for a second. Okay. Very simple video about some main differences. This young woman was talking about Filipino English, and she noticed some differences with American English. First one that she noticed is the word commute. Okay, this one was pretty simple. So in the US, it just means to go to work with whatever means of transportation, whereas in Filipino English, commute is specifically taking public transportation. This one generally does not give any problem at all in communication. Probably something that could give some difficulties is the use of as in. No, that means like in US English, but it means really in Filipino English. Okay? And then there's this cultural input, cultural digression about the word napkin and the use of napkins in the different contexts. Okay, so just a cultural comparison, let's say. And then I want you to do for 8 minutes, more or less, with this other video that is about the differences between the Philippines and the world. Okay, so pause the video now and go to link number 3. Okay, so now, wonderful video about all the differences. And so just notice 175 languages. Look at how important a common language could be, still keeping the varieties of local language. Then something else that I also noticed was about shopping malls and how this sort of Americanized culture thing has spread to the Philippines, and how it has become the center of communication, of interaction in these communities. If there's anybody from the Philippines, I would be very glad to know about their personal experience. And one word that you have to remember, because we're going to see it later on, is jeepney. Okay, that was pretty curious about how these American vehicles then became used for local transportation. And how spread out the Philippine community is, where 11% of the population works abroad, or their wonderful rice terraces. Whatever, yes, this video really had some insight into this wonderful population and these places. Now, next section is about vocabulary and idioms. Okay. Again, I don't want you to learn every single word. Okay, look at more what happens from a linguistic point of view. What happens is there's a first case where there are some locally coined words or expressions. One phenomenon is that you can add a prefix or a suffix to either a British or an indigenous word. For instance, in colloquial Singapore English, the word stingko means smelly. If you remember the English word stink, probably I spelt it incorrectly, I don't know. It could be that the K goes I swapped the G and the K. But anyway, smelly from stink, plus a suffix from colloquial, from Singaporean language. Or the Indian English spacey instead of spacious. So adding the suffix y to space. Same thing happens in the case of heady for Singapore Malaysian English, for spicy food. In some cases, some varieties wanted to create a female word for a word that was invariable. Like the word teacher in Indian English becomes teacheress for a female teacher. And here we go to jeepney from Philippine English. We saw those in the video. That is a small bus, okay? Because the army jeeps were converted into buses after World War II. Or also the two cases where Ghanaian English, install to install a chief, or destool to depose a chief. Okay, so in this first case, these phenomena all add an affix, so a suffix or prefix to a word that is either local or English to make a word of their own. Another phenomenon is compounding, where a local concept is compounded from English items. What do I mean? For instance, in Jamaican English, peelhead is a bald-headed person, a person with no hair. Peelhead. Or in East African English, dry coffee is simply coffee without milk or sugar. In African English, a chewing stick is a twig, chewed at only one end, that is used to clean your teeth. In many cases, as you can see, these words are explaining what they refer to. It is the case of Indian English, for instance, where key bunch is a bunch of keys, or in Indian English, a dining leaf is usually a leaf of a banana, lotus, or another other leaf that is used as a plate. In Lankan English, a basket woman is a woman that does not behave according to the standards, or at least here it's described as a coarsely behaved woman. Or figuratively, in Philippine English, a high hat is a snob. So in these cases, the second group is about compounding, deriving from English words. Now, what happens for borrowings? Obviously, we can expect that these new varieties of English borrow lots of words from the indigenous languages. It is for this reason that in East African English, you will hear words like chai for tea, or duka for shop, or manaba for laborer. In Indian English, a word like band, don't know the pronunciation, is a total strike. Or crore means 10 million. Swadeshi means native, homegrown. Or Philippine English borrows the words bundok for mountain and kundiman for a love song. Now, to get into what is the main topic of this course, I want you to watch a couple of videos about the idea of correct and incorrect English. The first one that I want you to watch is pretty short, 8 minutes, and it's from a TEDx about no such a thing as correct English. So pause the video and go to video number 4. I want you to reflect on a couple of things that this scholar said. You always used to talk about what is not inner circle English as a non-standard English or broken English. Broken English as not respecting the rules. But the rules of who? If we consider non-standard language as a language that does not respect the rules, this cannot be said for other English varieties, other than the inner circle varieties, because actually these languages do have some rules. They're probably not the inner circle rules, but they do have rules. It's for the case, for instance, of the habitual be, to say something that is usual. Okay, so it's not just not conjugating the verb to be in a sentence. It's indicating that something is habitual. So we keep hearing about saying it right, about saying it correctly, about saying it right. But we do not consider often that language changes. He analyzes the phenomenon that is called vocal fry, for which the Kardashians are so famous. And that can get pretty annoying, as he says, in some female individuals from the United States. This phenomenon, this scholar actually, looks at this phenomenon from a higher perspective. Yes, it could be annoying. Yes, the Kardashians might not be perfect. But they are analyzing, they're showing that language changes. No matter what. Because language belongs to people. Not to a people, but to people. Does this mean that you can speak, that you would pass your exam if you didn't know the difference between simple past and present perfect? No, you would not pass the exam anyway because you are learning inner circle English. Remember, you are not those who are producing the rules. You are norm dependent. I lost track of the time, but okay, I think that makes up a class with all the videos. So what did we do today? We had a look at verbs and how these tend to be simplified in other varieties of English, okay, where they don't mark the third person singular. There's a limited marking of the past tense, and that they tend to use more aspect than actual tenses. We also looked at the verb to be, that is used, the continuous form that is used also for stated verbs, and how these languages are very productive for phrasal and prepositional verb constructions. We compared the different types of tags that are used around the world, and more specifically, we focused on the variety of English spoken in the Philippines. And we saw how difficult it can be in some situations to speak English only, even in countries where English is used as the language of the institutions. The reason is that there are some concepts that can be explained in one language and others that have to be explained in another language. But still, the underlying idea is that you are intelligent only if you speak English. So there is a stigmatization around other varieties of English in local languages. Then we watched this video about some differences between Filipino English and American English, and a video about the 14 main differences between the Philippines and the rest of the world. From the vocabulary perspective, we looked at the interaction between local languages and English varieties of English, and how they build new vocabulary. In some cases, there are new words that are coined by the addition, for instance, of an affix that is added to the English word, or compounding, where English is used to explain, English items are used to explain a local concept. In some cases, there is just a mere borrowing from the indigenous languages. Then we started talking about the concept of no such a thing as correct English, and to getting into the debate between what has to be considered correct English and what not. And that is where we stopped for the theoretical part of the course. Now, as for the, wait a second, so this is 4, okay. So now I'm going to get all the links. Okay, so there's one, sorry. Give me a second, please. So there's 1. And 2. And 3. And 4. Okay. Copy it here at the end, okay, so that you can see where the class finishes for today. And put them over here. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and now as for today, the song that you gave me for today, Noah Cyrus, July. So let me make that a little bigger and I'll read that for you. I've been holding my breath. I've been counting to 10. Over something you said, I've been holding back tears. While you're throwing back beers, I'm alone in my bed. You know, I'm afraid of change. Guess what? Guess that's why we stay the same. So tell me to leave. I'll pack my bags. Get on the road. Find someone that loves you better than I do, darling. I know. 'Cause you remind me every day I'm not enough, but I still stay. Feels like a lifetime, just trying to get by. While we're dying inside, I've done a lot of things wrong. Loving you being one, but I can't move on. You know, I'm afraid of change. Guess that's why we stay the same. So tell me to leave. I'll pack my bags. Get on the road. Find someone that loves you better than I do, darling. I know. 'Cause you remind me every day that I'm not enough, but I still stay. If you want me to leave, then tell me to leave, and baby, I'll go. You remind me every day I'm not enough, but I still stay. Okay. So this is the last link to the song. And 5. Okay, so this is what we've done today. Keep arguing with that. Wait. What I knew. Sorry for that. Anyway, I'll do that on my own. Okay, so this is the end of the class. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, just put them in the comment box or send me an email. And see you tomorrow at our usual time, 10:30. Okay, have a nice day. Bye.